So welcome to Up Close, Meet the Poet Behind the Verse. This is our summer program featuring Loren Niemi. I am your host, River Erke, and with me is Julie Martin.
Hello.
A few housekeeping items is all our audience, please remain muted during the duration of the show. We will have a giveaway today, but details will be later. And need to remind us all that we're being recorded for a future video on YouTube. With that, why don't you sit back and I will introduce you to our summer up close poet, Loren Niemi. Loren is a lifelong storyteller, poet, photographer, printmaker, and has always been something of a traveler. He was born in Hibbing, Minnesota in 1944, the oldest of six with one brother and four sisters. They were Catholic, raised 50s style. Loren describes himself young. I began as a child fibber, but soon discovered that I was less interested in telling lies than I was in improving the truth. His mom insisted Loren and his brother attend Catholic school, but his sisters had a choice. After high school, Loren moved to Winona to enter the Catholic religious order at St. Mary's. He studied philosophy and religious studies. At the same time, he went to St. Teresa for studio art and Winona State for his teaching, graduating in 1970. Later on, he received his master's in American culture and studies. Today, Loren is a Midwestern storyteller with 45 years of creating, collecting, coaching, performing, producing, teaching, and writing about stories and what it means to be human. He is the recipient of a National Storytelling Network's Lifetime Achievement Award. Loren has published six books and two poetry chapbooks. His first book is critically acclaimed, Inviting the Wolf In, Thinking About Difficult Stories, was co-authored with Elizabeth Ellis. His next two books are on storytelling structure, The New Boo of Plots, and the point of view of the emotional arc of stories, co-authored with Nancy Donoval. His fourth book, What Haunts Us, Non-Traditional Ghost Stories, won the 2020 Midwest Book Award for sci-fi, horror, fantasy, paranormal fiction. His fifth is a poetry book, A Breviary of the Lost, 2022, and his latest is a novel, Circus Rex. Loren's two chapbooks employ the coyote trickster in Coyote Vote and Coyote Flies Coach. Without further ado, let us welcome Loren Niemi.
Yay.
Hey, good evening, Loren.
Hey, yeah.
So you moved around a lot growing up. You were born in Hibbing. Grade school, you were in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Junior high, you were in Hamburg, near Buffalo, New York. And then high school, you were here in the Twin Cities. Your father worked in a corporate world, and every new job was a new location. All this moving around, being the new kid, you say, gained you an acute observation of human behavior. Was there one place you liked more than the others?
Well, what's interesting is, of course, every one of the places I've lived has its own particularity, but I think I think in terms of just sort of the deep psychological, New Mexico,
Hmm.
the Rio Grande River Valley. If you think about Albuquerque, the mountains, Sandias are on the east, and when the sun sets, the mountains turn this sort of watermelon pink for just a brief period of time, and the darkness rises over them. Um, you know that that image has been with me since what I was 6 years old. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it'd be breathtaking. The mountain, yeah, totally. Well, once your father was ambitious and packed all of you kids up in Albuquerque, for an unforgettable road trip to Minnesota to visit family. What happened?
Well, that's a story that I tell sometimes often. So we were in the '57 Ford station wagon. My brother and I were in the back, the way back seats that where you look behind, and at least one sister, maybe two sisters. I don't exactly remember how many of us were there. Then we're up front, and as we're driving across Kansas, my father, says, "Oh, that's interesting." And I turned around and looked, and off in the distance there was this cloud that was really low, this sort of boiling, bubbling cloud. And as we got closer and closer, it became clear that it was not a cloud; it was a swarm of locusts. And pretty soon, as we were driving, it became very hard to drive. The bugs, these bugs are hitting the windshield, and they're all around, and the car is slip sliding. My father can't drive anymore. He's got to pull over to the side. And the temperature, I mean, the windows are closed. And as I'm looking at every window, you see, locusts just landing there, and it's getting hotter and hotter. And it's just and when they finally go, an hour or so later, when they finally go, there's this eerie silence. And when you look out at the landscape, it's all barren. Everything that could be eaten has
Wow.
been eaten. And so we drove a little further. We came to Dodge City, and my mother insisted we stop at a motel, and she insisted there be a swimming pool. And
Oh,
uh, the swimming pool was nice, but it did not prevent me from having a nightmare.
yeah, I bet that would be very nightmare material.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at the age of 7, you made a profound statement in class. What was that?
Well, okay. So you know, this, when I was in first grade, the nun asked about elephants, and I had, growing up, I actually, even before I could read, I was a reader, right? And if we would go visit someone, I would pick up magazines or I'd pick up books and I'd look at what was there. Um, and so the nun says, well, asked what we knew about elephants, and I began to talk about elephants. And I began to talk about elephants in a rather elaborate way. And she stopped and she said, "You're lying." And I said, "No, it's not a lie. It's a story. There's a difference."
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like that story. Well, do you have a poem for us
Um,
about, I think about something about Hibbing?
I do have a poem about Hibbing. So here we go. You gotta forgive me. I gotta try. These glasses are not completely normalized yet, or my eyes are not completely normalized. So I don't know if it's easier for me to read with glasses on or glasses off, but I have to hold the paper close.
Okay.
Here's what I remember of Hibbing as a child. The scary grandmother, the one that looked like the mean old woman on the bike in The Wizard of Oz, lived across the street. The other one, the grandmother who didn't speak English, she of the kitchen with fresh baked rolls and white frosting, she held a sugar cube between her teeth when she drank coffee. She lived further out beyond the cemetery with the flags. That every place my mother needed to go was either on First or Main, or sometimes on Howard, except for the library and the hospital, which wasn't on either, but I couldn't go to either of them also without my mother. That some guy who uh, that some guy who swore in Italian. Actually, his name was Mr. Papalardo. Mr. Papalardo, who swore in Italian, uh, lived in a one-room shack next to my Uncle Johnny's garage. My Aunt Sadie says I shouldn't pay any attention to him. Whatever he said was just nonsense. The ore dumps were there, the white birch growing from the sides. It was beautiful. There were vacant blocks with old North Hibbing, my father showed me, where the houses had all been moved to make way for the mines. And when you came to the edge of it, you came to the mine and you looked, and it was like the goddamn Grand Canyon. As far as you could see, a whole red, And in the bottom or near the bottom, little tiny trucks like toys, except they weren't. If you saw them up close, they were 20 feet tall with wheels 16 and 18 feet in diameter. My father sometimes came home with parades dressed as a clown with big shoes, like the one I threw into my brother's crib so he could see how big they were. But that wasn't what my dad did for work. That was what he did for sanity. What he did was a mystery, as was the mines where my uncles worked, as was the sauna on the farm where you would go, which you had to get to by walking past the old speckled rooster and the shed where the milk cans were kept. That rooster ran out and pecked me once. My father said, "Don't let it bother you." That rooster ran out and pecked my grandmother once. It was served for dinner the next day.
Wow. Um, I'm curious. Were you kind of a trickster as a kid?
I don't think so. I think I was kind of shy as a kid. I mean, that's why I was an observer. You know,
That makes sense.
I mean, in Albuquerque, when I went into the classrooms in the school, basically half of the kids in my classes, spoke Spanish, and so, I had to try to figure out what, there was the kind of a code. What they said in Spanish was what you couldn't say in English. And with the Spanish I learned in grade school, when I was in high school, I thought, oh, I'll take Spanish because I already got a leg up on this. And the first day we were in class and I said something, the instructor said, "We don't talk that kind of Spanish in this class."
Oh, you were in trouble.
Yeah. Well, and then when we got to Hamburg, um, suddenly I went from being just, I mean, I was not only an outsider, but I was also the smartest kid in the room, which could have been a problem, except that the me to help them with their homework. So
Oh,
it was great because it kept me from getting beat up.
totally. Because that's in New York, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was in New York. Yeah, that's also where that's also where I got drum. My brother and I, myself, my Tom, and actually the neighbor kids as well. Sonny Tracy and his brother Quickie and George Wheeler. We were all in the same Boy Scout troop, and we were all in the same patrol, and we all got drummed out of the Boy Scouts at the same time because of a small incident winter camping where the cabin burned down. Um,
Oh.
uh, Someone broke their leg up riding on a toboggan going down the wrong hill. The Scoutmaster's car went into the lake, and when we rolled down the windows to get out, the clouds of smoke just preceded us. Just,
And you
yeah.
got kicked out.
Yeah, the Scoutmaster said, "You go be the juvenile delinquents you obviously want to be."
Hmm. Well, here's another one. You were raised Catholic. Actually, all your schooling from kindergarten through college
Yep,
was a Catholic school. But after high school, you went into the Catholic religious order at St. Mary's, which is a Christian Brothers University.
right.
You were there for 7 years until they kicked you out.
Yeah.
Can you explain? Please
Well,
explain.
well, the joke is, I was a member of a religious order, poverty, chastity, obedience. I was good at one of them, and that's the one that got me thrown out. Um,
Hmm.
and the one I was good at was indeed poverty. And what got me thrown out was, as they said when they threw me out, it isn't so much what you believe, it's that you keep talking about it out loud. Um, and what I was talking about out loud was that I didn't think the brothers should be in suburban schools. I didn't think the brothers should golf on weekends. I thought, John Baptist de La Salle, who was the founder of the Christian Brothers, a French guy before the Revolution, had said, the brothers work with the poor. And I took that very seriously. Work with the poor, live with the poor, you know, not some fancy suburban palace. No.
And golf on the weekend.
And golf
Yeah.
on the weekends. Yeah. Drink during the week and golf on the weekends.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
only doing it what they want to.
Yeah.
So your fifth book is about this time of your life.
Yep.
What memoir? Brever, I can't say that
Breviary.
word.
Breviary. A
Breviary.
breviary
That's how you
is a
say
kind
it.
of a prayer book. So it's divided
Oh,
up into what is called the canonical hours. You start with matins early in the morning, and you go through matins, lauds, none, and then you wind up with vespers and compline at the end of the day. You know,
okay.
and so the as a memoir of poetry, each of it's the poems are divided into sort of those days and progress through time periods through the years. So um,
Well, do you have a poem from there you like
I
to read?
do. I do have a poem. This is from the novitiate. The novitiate is the first year of training. So this would have been from Matins section. The coats. In the basement, mysteries and treasures in the storeroom, with shelves along one wall of black pants, some worn, others almost new, neatly folded with no discernible sizing, next to the piles of heavy knit sweaters of blue or black, not folded but overflowing in boxes, while along another set of shelves, what we called bunny boots, army surplus boots with hard rubber shells and fleece linings. And in the center, there were 3 rows of piping with robes and coats hanging on short on one end and long on the other. I had no interest in the robes, as I had two, one to wear and one to spare, but the coats, they called out, "Come try a navy peacoat or a stiff khaki army trench coat. Put me on and feel the life that once was me, what once wore me, the shape of shoulders under my weight, the story of this missing button or that pipe left in the deep pocket. It was a good pipe, though short of stamina, a walnut bowl blackened by familiarity. I'd slip in at the end of the day to smell the sweat of other lives and hold that pipe, trying to imagine who and what, where, and anywhere that was not the stasis of the novitiate, between the careless joy of high school and the empty chapel above."
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's do a little switch over to but when you explained to me storytelling, like you
Huh.
called it as a mother art.
Yeah.
I totally got that. But then you said to me, storytelling is the first defeat of death. And I was like, huh? Can you explain that to us?
Okay. So one of the great values of storytelling is it allows the person's experience to move beyond their own lifespan. In story, you can go from generation to generation. You can go from culture to culture. In stories, you can accumulate wisdom beyond what any one individual has. And therein lies the defeat of death. Because death is that moment where whatever you know comes to an end, or at least as far as we can tell.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, one of the things they say is that when someone dies, as long as their name is remembered, they have not disappeared. And the same thing is, as long as stories are told from the people who have passed, they're still alive. Their stories are still alive. So as an example,
So,
the Baal Shem Tov once told a story, a very simple story about the Rabbi Zisha. And he said, the Rabbi Zisha would gather his students around and he would say to them, "When I die, he who is above all will not say to me, why were you not Moses? Why were you not David? Why were you not Solomon? No, he will say to me, why were you not Zisha?"
mm,
So
totally.
a story like that has tremendous carrying power.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for all the time.
yeah.
So Can we hear the story when you declared you were a storyteller at the age of 31 and 78?
You want to hear that, the story of my declaring myself a storyteller?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the way you said
Well,
these.
I was working for the city of Minneapolis at the time. I was my technically I was a community organizer, although I was doing a wide range of things. Um, I would think of it more as being a community builder. And in fact, at that particular moment in 1978, I was actually working, managing projects for the Minneapolis Arts Commission. I was working with one of the great geniuses of the time, Melisande Charles. And I was at a conference in Madison, Wisconsin, an arts conference, and a lovely woman by the name of Joy Martin she and I were sitting together. We were having a martini, and she leans across the table and she says, "What the hell is it that you actually do?" And without really thinking very much, I said, "I'm a storyteller. I work with individuals and with groups and with communities, and I help them identify what their story is, shape how they want to tell it, and then tell it in ways that will produce results." And as soon as I said it, I recognized that it was true. It applied to community organizing and it applied to the projects I was working on. But it got me started to thinking about, well, what other kinds of stories could I tell or might I tell or am I interested in? And then, then began years of study and research and strange adventures.
And that leads us right into the next question. You studied stories, the structure, the folklore, traditions, and even the philosophy. You made a career with your love of storytelling. A career I've actually found myself envious of. Is there one type of like story you like more than others?
um, I'm not sure there is one. I mean, I tell more personal stories than anything else. I mean, but that again, this comes back to the idea this, and the same thing applies to poetry. If you observe the world, if you observe human beings, what they do, how they respond, how they act, how you respond, how you act in relationship to them and to the world, then you have the beginnings of poems. Then you have the beginnings of stories. And so everything I've done for work since 1978 has been a story or has been story related. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I did a year of in northern Minnesota as the I love this, the serendipity of this, as the humanities scholar in residence for the Arrowhead region, right? So I got paid money by the Minnesota Humanities Commission to sit in bars and churches and cafes and talk with people to collect to ask them questions, to collect their
Yeah,
stories,
that's
you
I
know,
would have given I just so envious. I would have loved that.
you know,
It's a
and
great.
so yeah, so I did that, and then 2 years later, 1983, as a result of something that had happened, I wound up working with Heart of the Beast on what is the Circle of Water Circus. So, like on this Saturday, the Hennepin History Museum is having the opening of an exhibit about the Circle of Water Circus, and the puppets that were used, and photographs, and documentation, and all of that stuff. And there's going to be and one of the things they're going to do is they're going to sell the novel, because the novel Circus Rex is the fictional version of that tour. And if
Ah,
anyone who actually was on that tour could go through the novel and they could say, "Oh, this is true. This is true. This actually happened." But most of those things that they would say are true or actually happened don't make any sense as in the real world. They only make sense as fiction. So
yeah, in people's minds, yes. Well,
yeah,
that's uh, by bringing up Circus Rex. Actually, we're
yeah. Here,
gonna
wait,
move
wait.
on to the giveaway.
Yeah, wait. Let me see if I can get this book. I can't. Can't. There we go. There we go. There
Yeah,
we
you
go.
gotta hold it up.
There it is.
So he's gonna give one of these books away, and then
Yep.
one other one. So all of you out there, make a guess between 1 and 50. Put it in the chat, and whoever comes closer to one of the numbers without going over will win a book. The other book that Loren's going to give away is one of his coyotes, kind of fitting of the time. The coyote,
Yeah.
whoa, disappeared on us.
Yeah, I know. It's
Coyote
because of the
vote
blurring effect. Vote Coyote, that's right.
or vote coyote.
Perfect
Yeah.
book for an election year. A complete campaign from the moment of decision to the losing, to the concession speech.
Well, could we hear a poem from there?
Sure you can, sure.
Cool.
Coyote's campaign slogans. Our town is my town was a little too close to copyright infringement. I can't do any worse than the other guy. Did not get a thumbs up from the focus group. Meatballs for everyone implied a Pastafarian promise that he might have a hard time keeping. Just more and better of whatever was both a little vague and a promise he probably could not keep either. Vote Coyote sounded safe until someone added Acme endorsed. But all the same, Vote Coyote was the one that stuck.
Mhm.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you gotta get that out. This is our time of a little humor in the selection would be good.
Yeah, really. All right.
Um, so you being a traveler, is there a particular like favorite place you've ever been?
Mostly where I am now. I just,
Oh, I love that answer.
I mean, there are, when I like New York, I like LA, I like Albuquerque, I like Minneapolis, I love Duluth, I like Madison, there are lots of places I want to go back to over and over again. Montreal, Toronto, Seattle, Vancouver, you know, I like places that have, yeah, and I do tend to more to focus on the United States than on Europe or Asia. Not because they're not lovely, and there's lots of interesting places in other parts of the world, but it is the celebration of American culture that has driven so much of what I do. So
It makes sense. And yeah, totally. I love your answer. So, I mentioned most of your education in the intro, but after Winona, you did attend the University of Minnesota for 2 years for
well,
art.
actually I did the University of Minnesota while I was in Winona. It's like I would do Winona during the regular school year and then University of Minnesota for the summers, right?
Okay.
Living on Nicollet Island and driving taxi. So
Well, can you explain what you studied?
could I explain what was that, River?
What you studied?
What was I
Like,
studied? I studied
yeah,
art. Yeah,
yeah.
studied.
What particularly? What was
Well,
your?
at the University of Minnesota, my focus was all on printmaking.
Okay.
Two guys, Carl Bethke and Zygmunt Preedy, where I just took class after class from each of them, because and they were so old school. They both retired long since then. The other guy at the university who I had a chance to spend time with, but I didn't really have a lot of. I mean, my summers at the University of Minnesota gave me exposure on the art side to. I'm blocking on his name right now, which is interesting. Because he would come into the art building, right? The old factory building where the library on the West Bank is now. And he would say, I'm going to be in my office, which meant he was going to go down to the Mixers, which was on the corner of Washington and Cedar. And he would sit in a booth, and if you wanted to talk with him, you went and you sat with him and chatted there, because as he sipped.
Was this John Berryman?
No, Berryman was the other guy who was a great. I sat in on a bunch of his classes, and Berryman was interesting because it didn't make any difference whether he was sober or hungover. Um, I don't ever think he ever was drunk in class, but he certainly was hungover a number of times. Uh, and and yet the moment I mean, he had such a respect for poetry and for language, and such a profound. It's like he could be just just struggling to maintain himself, and then he would begin to do Yeats or Keats. He could recite these poems from memory, and the most beautiful language, and half the students in the room it just went right over their head, but uh, I mean, yeah, he's one of the reasons why I'm a poet,
That's
exposure
pretty
to
cool.
that man. So
That's something to, sounds like it. Yeah. Um, well, I was going to say a little side note, and you kind of brought it up that you drove taxi while you were in school.
yeah,
You say you drove it at night, right?
yeah, I would drive from midnight till 8 or 9 in the morning. So
Well, and you told me that you, Hardy, and Scott, like last year, uh, did a reading together.
yeah,
Well, because you were all taxi drivers in the Twin Cities in like what, 3 different decades or something?
yeah. So I drove in the 60s. Scott Vetch drove in the 70s into the early 80s, and Hardy drove, in this century. So
I'm sorry I missed that. It's
it was
something
it
else.
was it was what was interesting is how much it did not change from decade to decade,
Uh,
except where
a
you
lot
pick people up. I mean, when I was
uh,
driving taxi, the bars closed at 1, and I'd go to places like the Copper Squirrel, which was owned by a Kid Can, and it's gone. I would go to Mousie's. I would go to the Carousel. These places don't exist anymore. I would go to Moby Dick's, which also doesn't exist anymore. Interesting enough, if you never went to pick someone up at Moby Dick's in the front door, you always picked them up at the back door. If you pick someone up at the Gay 90s, which still is there, you pick them up at the back door. People did not want to be seen.
these certain places.
Yeah, right. And then
So,
you'd take them home, or you'd take them to parties, or you'd take them to some after hours joint. So,
mhm.
and then around
Did
2
you
in the
run into
morning.
your professor?
Huh?
Did you run into your professor?
Yeah, well, I picked up John Berryman one time at the um at one of the downtown places, and I drove him back to his house, and I was tempted to say, I'm really enjoying your class, but he was in no mood to talk about school.
Well,
Instead I said, hey buddy, what was that address again?
so in 80 to 90, you worked in arts and education over 5 different states as a
Mhm.
storyteller.
Yep.
One of those jobs was in North Dakota in a one-room schoolhouse. You
Actually,
have
there were 2 one-room schoolhouses. The last 2 one-room schoolhouses in North Dakota.
wow. You have a
Between the
funny.
2 I mean, one schoolhouse had like 12 kids from 4 families. The other schoolhouse had like, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 kids and probably 3 families. But, and it was K through 8. By the time they got to junior high, they were being shipped to, to the bigger school at Beach, North Dakota, exit 1 on I-90.
You have a funny story about one of the kids,
So
and
yeah, so I went into one. Let me just also say that in these one-room schoolhouses for lunch, one mother would make lunch for everybody, and they would sort of rotate, right? And they would all coordinate what they were going to, otherwise you'd wind up with beans and franks day after day. But so one day I go into this class, and there's this kid, and he's got his arm in a sling, and I go, "What happened to you?" He says, "Oh, I hit a tree." And I said, "How can you hit a tree? There are so few trees, they're marked on maps." And he said, "Well, I was chasing a cow on my motorbike, and the cow turned, but the tree didn't.
Oh,
So
wonder about that little boy, huh?
all I could think was, high school is going to be a real interesting process
Mhm.
for you.
Well, here's a question for you. What's the most surprising thing that's changed over your life?
The most surprising thing that's changed over the course of my life has been the rise of intolerance. I mean, there's always been a certain degree of fear of the other. There's always been a certain amount of intolerance of strangers, but these days it is much more acutely present and political than it used to be. Um,
Mm.
I mean, when I was in the 60s, in the late 60s, I was involved with anti-war and anti-draft stuff in Winona, and we would do a demonstration, and the police would be there, and the Semper Fi, the Marine fraternity would be there, and people would be shouting, and yet we'd all wind up in the same bar afterwards, drinking side by side.
Now they beat each other up.
Yeah, nowadays you wouldn't go to every bar is separate, might as well
Yeah.
have a label that says, Trumpist or progressive or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so in Chicago in 98 to 01, you were in Chicago
Yep,
and you had a Bush Fellowship
yep.
to research the role of storytelling in community development. What did this entail?
Well, basically it entailed one of the reasons I was in Chicago because I was flying out of Chicago from Midway or O'Hare like every week. It entailed me going around the country to talking to people and asking them about how story functioned in their organization or their neighborhood. Some of them were theater groups, some of them were political organizations, some of them were, um, in Chicago there used to be a group called Red Moon Theater, and one of the things they did is they did an annual parade in the Lincoln neighborhood, and it was sort of like their version. I mean, if you're in the Twin Cities, think about May Day and what May Day used to be, and then sort of shift it to Halloween. And you have the Red Moon Theater's sort of, Halloween parade. Huge combos, um, marching skeletons and drums and torches and you know but the process of building that parade and the process, they would do little ofrendas. They would build these along the way. They would have these little altars in commemoration of the dead, you know, and they acknowledged in that neighborhood the Spanish roots, the Portuguese roots, the English, the German, all of it. So, I spent time with them and, observing what they did, talking to them about why they did it, collecting the information. Someday I'll get around to doing a book around all of the material that came out of that research, because there's
Okay.
lots of it. So, and it also prompted me to do, I mean, I came out of Chicago and basically I did 10 years of civic engagement, advocacy training, and lobbying. So, which is
You
all
have,
just another kind of story.
you have a very, very, I don't know, your background is very, very interesting. I would love to have done some of these jobs that you were lucky to, you did. But so I lost my place. Oh, this is another curiosity of mine. With your background, I'm curious, where do you stand on religion today?
Where do I stand on religion today? Well, again, the joke is, I'm a fallen away Catholic. I'm a bad Buddhist. I'm a so Unitarian. Basically, I have I believe in spirituality, but not necessarily in organized religion. I think organized religion is, the value of organized religion is the community it offers. But if
Yeah,
that community is toxic, it's less than useful.
totally.
So
totally. Well, currently you're working on two short story collections. One has a reoccurring character. Can you describe him?
Yeah, so I'm working on a collection of stories around a character called Vito. And Vito's based on, originally it was based on one person I knew who has since passed. And a couple of trips he and I took. But it's now been expanded to include bits and pieces of other characters but Vito is by inclination a gambler, and by profession he had worked for the city, and eventually he left the city and he wound up working for the university, running a little kind of research program where he had as I say in one of the stories, a budget small enough not to be noticed and grad students to do the work.
Cool. Well, let's see here. You taught another thing you did. You taught at Metro State Theater and Communications Department from 92 to 2018, and at St. Thomas from 2015 to 2020. That ended when the pandemic
Yep.
happened. When that stopped the teaching, but you personally didn't think you were done teaching yet, and you and Christine founded the School of Storytelling for online classes. But that didn't take long, and you found a location.
Well, let's be clear. Christine found a location, and
Oh, there we go.
yeah, I gotta, you gotta give her credit, because she, in many ways, Christine is the engine that drives the American School of Storytelling. As she says, I'm the mouthpiece.
A very good pair together. But can you explain what the school offers today? So just give us the whole spiel.
So the American School of Storytelling is dedicated to orality, to storytelling, poetry, spoken word, singer-songwriters when we can get them. Last night we had comedy, comedy show, and it felt like it belonged. So we do online classes, we do in-person classes and workshops, both here in the Twin Cities in our location at 1762 Hennepin, and around the country. I'll go to some other places to teach. And then we do performances and support performances. So we tried the third Monday of every month, we have a storytelling open mic. The fourth Monday of every month, we have a poetry open mic, and those I'm really committed to those, because the people, an eclectic group of people come to both of those, and the styles of stories and the styles of poetry are just beautifully in terms of the range. And then we try once a month to have featured performers. So we've had Jim Stoll in to do a series last year, and he's going to do another series of 4 this next year. Larry Long is going to do a music performance in September. The American School of Storytelling is going to be a site for the Fringe. We're going to do 9 days of the 11 days of the Fringe with performances, storytelling performances at 7 o'clock and at 9 or 8:30 with myself, with Howard Lieberman, with Maureen Cooney, with
Leslie.
Huh?
Leslie.
With Leslie, yeah, with Leslie Park from New York, and with it's like I keep blocking on his name.
Sufan.
Sufan, thank you, Sufan, who's also doing a performance tomorrow night. The Immigrants Tour of America. Sufan Zahemkov. So Russian immigrant, funny guy, beautifully crafted material.
Well, then you got the myth something on July 20th.
July.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, right. Brian Wara is going to do a myth and personal story. Yeah. And when I was talking with Brian about he says, yeah, we'll do like Gilgamesh and the Odyssey, and he says, and Godzilla, and I recognize that that's the myth he's working with, Godzilla.
It's funny. So, we're so in the 70s. Let's go back to the 70s. We took a workshop in Milwaukee with
Buckminster Fuller, yeah.
Buckminster Fuller. You had interesting story about about when he was on stage. Isn't that the guy?
Yeah. So, I mean, my eyesight, right? Earlier this year I had both cataract surgery and a retina repair, and so my eyesight has not completely recovered yet. And so what I can see and where I can see it is a little problematic. But Buckminster Fuller had major eye problems, and so we're in Milwaukee, and he's up on this stage, and he starts to talk, and as he's talking, he starts to walk around, and so the people who organized it had like 4 or 5 of us who were recruited or volunteered to sit in the first row close to the stage, and as Bucky began to wander towards the edge of the stage, we would stand up to catch him if he stepped off. So
That's funny. Well, I think right now, before we go into doing a reading, because we have 10 minutes left, I think we should find out who has won our giveaway. Who are the 2 winners?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Julie,
Hey,
we have
George is the lucky winner. George
George.
came the closest, yep. And then Vicky came in second.
Oh, Vicky. So George and Vicky. Now, who's the closest to 7?
Vicky.
Vicky, you get I think that's what Coyote vote. Isn't that what we chose? And then Circus
I mean,
Rex.
if Vicky wants vote Coyote, that's good. Otherwise, happy to send her, Circus Rex. I think George has a copy of Circus Rex, so.
Oh, okay. Do you want Circus Rex, Vicky?
You're muted, Vicky.
Well,
Yes,
We'll work it out.
yes,
yes,
I'll take Circus Rex.
okay. So
Yep, thank
Vicky
you.
and George, send a direct message to Lauren in the chat with your addresses.
Okay.
Now, do you have like 5 minutes worth of some stuff to read to us? Poetry or something from a book? Or do you want to tell the story of the plow story from Duluth?
I see. This is the problem with doing these pre-interviews is you get sort of caught on particular stories. But yeah, I'll tell the plow story.
That's a funny
Only and
story.
partially because it's relevant. So this week, of course, there was rain and lots more rain, and the city of Cook flooded. But the plow story takes place. I was doing a residency in Cook, and I was being hosted by this couple in this little Finnish farmstead, this very old school place. Unfortunately, they were in the process of getting a divorce, and every night they would argue, and they wanted me to be the referee, which was not acceptable to me and not very happy. So as the end of the week came, I could not wait to get out, except it snowed and it snowed and it snowed, and came Saturday morning, I thought, if the plow has gone by, I will get out anyway. And so I saw the plow, in fact, had gone by. And so I packed up the car and I got in, and I'm driving along, and the county road was plowed all the way to highway to 50, 52, 53, whatever that one is, that goes from Cook down to Virginia and from Virginia down to Duluth. And so I'm driving along and it's all pretty good. And I got down just past Virginia a little ways, and there's this little cloud in front of me, and I recognize that cloud is the plow, the the state plow, and it's just blowing snow and blowing snow, and I couldn't really see, and I thought, geez, if I'm not careful, I'm going to just run right into the back end of this guy. And so without thinking, and it's literally without thinking well,
Mhm.
I passed him. And suddenly I'm in front of the plow. And there's 6 inches, 8 inches of snow on the road. And I look in the rearview mirror, and all I can see is the blade of the plow getting closer and closer. And I can't stop, and he's not going to slow down. So we went down a couple of miles, we went 4 or 5 miles down the road this way with, I'm just sweating and just driving and just white knuckling and with my foot to the floor, fishtailing as I go, watching the plow just come closer and closer until we got to Cotton, and he turned off to get a cup of coffee.
And you had a nightmare.
So I went on to Duluth, but of course when I got to Duluth, it was as bad or worse. There was no place to park on Park Point where I was living at the time.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of snow. You're in trouble
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Park Point. I mean, until they start hauling out some of the snow to
yeah.
be,
You know,
yeah.
when you get down to the lift bridge and there's a front end loader that's trying to remove the snow so the bridge can operate, you think, oh, what the hell is this?
Too
If I
much
was smart,
snow.
I would have just turned around and went and parked in a hospital ramp and walked to Park Point or gotten a cab.
Oh,
So
yeah. It's amazing. Some of the, I one time, I think it was a lot, Duluth, a lot of snow one year. We ended up finding the pile that where they hauled all the snow out the city and put it in a pile out of town. It was there's a lot of snow. You don't get that much snow anymore.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, this is climate change.
Yeah.
We don't get those kinds of winters anymore. You know,
Uh,
yeah, when living in Duluth is interesting because in the winter the question is you know can you go up, and the other question is can you go down, and can you stop if you're going down?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember a blizzard, one or two blizzards my mom and I took out our cross country skis. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
But then we went down, but didn't get to go back up for a while. Yeah. Oh, so
Why do I
thank
love
you.
Duluth? Because it's there's a challenge in living there.
Oh, it's just so beautiful. Something else though, the weather up there is pretty something else.
Yeah.
But thank you, Lauren. This has been an awesome interview.
Okay.
And thank you to the audience for supporting up close who's here. This is the 22nd interview that I've done. A lot of those you can view on YouTube channel. It's one word, Up Close Poets. And while you're there, please subscribe. We'd like to reach maybe 50 someday. But the next Up Close, it will be in October for our autumn program, guests to be announced. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your summer and remember to support the arts. And we can